So if you take a DNA test, right, and it says your ancestors were Vikings.
Okay, Vikings.
Yeah, Vikings. But then your great uncle was a decorated Caribbean police commissioner.
Oh, wow. That is quite the combo.
Right. And your immediate instinct, like when someone challenges you, is to just start arguing in a flawless Trinidadian dialect.
That's amazing.
So the question is, where are you from?
That is a tough one.
It is. Just think about your answer to that question for a second, for the listener. Chances are your brain immediately tried to hand you a tidy geographical coordinate.
Like a city or a state.
Exactly. A country. You probably pictured a passport cover or, I don't know, a specific border.
Mm-hmm.
Well, today's deep dive is going to completely ruin your tidy answer to that question. We're going to look at how this operates on a massive national scale, and then we'll zoom all the way into the deeply personal psychology of how you define yourself.
And our grounding source for this exploration is just this remarkable essay. It's titled, Who Are We? Barbados and the Meaning of Identity.
It's a great read.
It really is. It was written by Ian R. Clayton. He's the founder of Barbados.org and the author of Rogues in Paradise.
Oh.
And Clayton uses the island of Barbados as like a magnifying glass to examine the underlying mechanisms of identity.
Yeah, he doesn't just look at what identity is on the surface.
No, not at all. He breaks down exactly how it's formed, how it absorbs trauma and triumph, and how it's constantly evolving.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really wrap our heads around the true mechanics of identity, we have to start at the macro level.
Right, the big picture.
Yeah, we need to look at a nation that has spent centuries physically holding two radically different, completely contradictory historical realities in the exact same space.
And Barbados is the ultimate case study for this kind of extreme cognitive dissonance.
It really is.
I mean, when you look at the historical timeline of Barbados, the duality is staggering.
Like, wow.
For centuries, Barbados operated under this deeply ingrained moniker of Little England.
Little England.
Yeah, and this was not just some superficial nickname for the tourism board.
Right, it wasn't just a marketing campaign.
Exactly. It was a structural and psychological reality. Barbadians considered themselves British subjects.
Wow.
They built their entire societal infrastructure, their parliament, their legal systems, their education to completely mirror British traditions.
They even traveled across the Atlantic to study at British universities.
Yep.
They fought and died in British wars. They celebrated royal milestones. Like, that was their lived reality for generations.
But that is only one layer of the soil.
Right.
Because simultaneously, occupying that exact same geographic space, Barbados holds the heavy foundational distinction of being Britain's first fully developed slave society.
Man. And the wealth generated by those specific Barbadian sugar plantations, I mean, that was the economic engine that quite literally built the British Empire.
Yes. And the mechanism of that plantation system, it was designed to erase the identities of the enslaved.
Just total erasure.
Yeah. Yet amidst the horrific, systematic brutalization of that reality, African tradition survived.
Which is incredible.
It is. And they didn't just survive passively. They adapted. Against unimaginable odds, those traditions wove themselves into the fabric of the island.
Right.
Out of that profound trauma and survival, entirely new Caribbean identities began to forge themselves, existing right alongside the Little England institutions.
You see this continual evolution culminating in milestones, too, like their push for independence in 1966.
A huge moment.
Yeah, and then the monumental transition to a republic in 2021.
Right.
So you're looking at this place, and it functions exactly like a double exposure photograph.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like someone takes a picture on a film camera, forgets to wind the film forward, and takes another picture on the exact same frame. The light hits the chemical emulsion twice.
And the two images are permanently burned into the same physical space.
But if a nation can physically hold two wildly opposing truths in its soil, what happens to the human brain living on top of it?
That is the big question.
Yeah, how does a single person process that duality without breaking apart? Because these dual histories don't just exist in a museum exhibit.
Right, they're lived.
Yeah, they manifest in the daily lives, the memories, and the mindsets of the citizens walking down the street today.
Well, Clayton's research for Rogues in Paradise gives us a window into exactly how the individual processes this.
Oh, good.
He interviewed citizens whose lives reflect completely different, seemingly incompatible ways of understanding what it means to be Barbadian.
Okay, give me an example.
So he introduces us to an elderly gentleman named Woolley Hewitt. And Woolley looks back on much of the colonial period quite warmly.
Which makes sense when you consider his personal timeline.
Right.
His memories, his localized reality, his coming of age that was all shaped by the world he knew at that time. That stability and structure is his genuine experience of the island.
Yet, just down the street, Clayton speaks to others who have a completely different focal point.
Like what?
People who view Africa as the ultimate, pure spiritual source of Caribbean identity.
Oh, I see.
For them, the colonial period is not something to be remembered warmly. It is a period of violent erasure.
Right, of course.
Their ancestral connections and their sense of self stretch far beyond the physical shores of Barbados, bypassing the British influence entirely to root themselves in the African continent.
Look, it sounds beautiful and diplomatic to say, none of these people are wrong, which is what the essay suggests.
Yeah.
But in reality, if Woolley is romanticizing the colonial era, and his neighbor views that same era as a brutal erasure of African spirituality, how are those not mutually exclusive?
It's a fair point.
How does a society not just fracture into anger when the citizens hold fundamentally opposing realities?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is exactly the warning at the heart of Clayton's essay.
Oh, he addresses this.
Yeah. History matters. Unpacking the painful, difficult chapters is the only mechanism we have to truly understand the context of our neighbors. But history becomes psychologically and socially dangerous when it is used exclusively as a weapon.
When you reduce complex historical context into ammunition to win a modern argument.
Right. When history is weaponized, it forces that zero-sum game. It says, if my historical perspective is right, your lived experience must be entirely invalid.
That's toxic.
It is.
Yeah.
That invalidation instantly breeds anger, and anger solidifies into permanent societal division. Clayton asserts that Barbados deserves better than that kind of division.
So how do they avoid it?
By refusing to flatten its history into a single, easily weaponized narrative. Barbados provides a masterclass in how a society can accept composite realities. They acknowledge the scars of the plantation and the structure of the parliament without demanding that one citizen's memory invalidate another's.
That's incredibly powerful. And if an entire country can hold on to a messy, multi-layered identity without fracturing, let's zoom in even closer.
Let's do it.
Let's look at the actual author of this essay, Ian R. Clayton, because his personal background absolutely shatters any conventional definition of where are you from.
Oh, it really does. His biography is just this geographic and ancestral collision.
Yeah. His family tree is equally sprawling. His mother was born in Dominica, but eventually made Barbados her home.
Right.
His grandmother became a Barbadian citizen, and he has generations of family members buried in Barbadian soil.
And add to that, his great-uncle, who was a decorated British officer during the Second World War and later served as the commissioner of police at the Caribbean headquarters in Barbados.
It's just so layered.
It is. And to push the complexity even further, Clayton mentions that a DNA test linked him to Viking and Irish roots.
I mean, you literally have Viking DNA, British military history, and Caribbean roots operating in the exact same nervous system. Barbados has shaped his life for more than 50 years, not because a piece of paper declared it, but because life did.
Yes.
But there is a specific interaction in the essay that captures the exact mechanism of how we navigate these layers.
The one about the dialect, right?
Yeah, Clayton is talking to someone who asks where he's from.
So Clayton answers, Trinidad.
Mm-hmm.
And the person looks at him and says, you may have lived there, but you're not really a Trini.
It's the ultimate challenge to identity. The person is basically asking to see the tidy box.
Exactly.
Now, Clayton could have reacted defensively. He could have pulled out his birth certificate or cited the number of years he lived there or aggressively argued his localized knowledge.
But instead, he bypasses the logical argument entirely. He replies to the person in full, flawless Trinidadian dialect.
Just switches it on.
Yeah, he instantly shifts the rhythm and cadence of his speech, and the result is immediate. They both burst out laughing.
Wow.
The tension just completely dissolves.
Here's where it gets really interesting. When you think about why that dialect shift works, it changes the entire analogy of identity.
How so?
Well, we often talk about identity like a wardrobe. You wear your professional outfit for the immigration officer, and then you change into your Trinidad dialect outfit for your friends.
Right, I've heard that. Code switching.
Exactly. But changing clothes implies putting on a superficial costume. It implies you are taking one thing off to put something else on.
Ah, I see.
This essay suggests identity is much more like a geological rock formation.
I love that analogy.
Every place Clayton lived, every ancestor he had is a layer of sediment, Time and pressure compress those layers into one solid stone. You can't extract the Viking DNA from the Trinidadian dialect. It's all baked into the same rock. The dialect wasn't a costume he put on to trick the person. The dialect was proof of proximity.
Yes.
It was proof of a shared lived experience. It communicated like, I have walked the same streets and absorbed the same cultural rhythms as you.
But if we carry all these different geological layers, if we are highlighting the passport-holding professional in one room and highlighting the dialect-speaking local in another, does that make us less authentic? Are we just shape-shifting to survive whatever room we happen to be standing in?
Well, this raises an important question, and it's really the crucible of the entire essay. Who actually holds the authority to decide who we are?
Right. Who's the judge?
Exactly. Is our identity dictated by the immigration officer looking at a geographic coordinate on a passport?
No.
Is it decided by the stranger on the street, categorizing us by our physical appearance or our accent?
Or the guy trying to act as the gatekeeper of what constitutes a real Trini?
Exactly. The island thrives not in spite of its history, but because it holds on to its beautiful contradictions.
It doesn't pretend the brutal realities never happened, but it vehemently refuses to become imprisoned by them.
The essay paints this incredible visual of the island's composite reality.
Yeah, the imagery is great.
It's the juxtaposition of ancient coral stone meeting the relentless Atlantic surf. It is the sound of colonial church bells ringing out at the exact same time as a calypso rhythm.
I love that.
It is vast sugar fields carrying all their immense historical weight and trauma, existing right next door to modern university lecture halls focused on the future.
It's village cricket matches on a Sunday afternoon, seamlessly coexisting with high-level international diplomacy on a Monday morning.
Just existing side by side.
Yeah, its identity has never been one single isolated story. The ultimate takeaway from the Barbados model is that holding on to complexity is not a vulnerability.
No, not at all.
It is an incredible source of resilience. As Clayton writes, we can carry history without allowing history to carry us.
So what does this all mean? We've explored the structural duality of a Caribbean island, and we've analyzed the psychological weight of DNA, dialects, and sediment layers.
We've covered a lot.
We have. But for the person listening to this right now, someone who might feel trapped by an external label, or confused by the conflicting layers of their own history, how do they practically apply this Barbados model to their own life?
Well, it requires a fundamental paradigm shift in how your brain processes the concept of self.
Okay.
And it is the exact shift Clayton uses to conclude his essay. For our entire lives, our legal systems, our institutions, and our social circles have conditioned us to ask the question, who are we?
Right. That's always the question.
But that question is a trap.
Really?
Yeah, it is entirely static. It forces your brain to look backward to your ancestry, your birthplace, your past mistakes, or your past glories. It demands that you produce the tidy box.
Oh, I see. It demands a fixed coordinate on a map that you've already passed.
Exactly. The much more powerful question, the one that aligns with the actual mechanics of a lived identity, is who are we becoming?
Oh, wow. Who are we becoming?
Yeah.
That entirely changes the physics of the conversation. You move from a fixed point to a trajectory.
It changes the neuroplasticity of how you view yourself. When you ask who you are becoming, you immediately create room for growth.
Yeah, because the future isn't written.
Right. You create the psychological space required for forgiveness, both for your own past actions and the actions of others.
That's beautiful.
It reminds you that while you cannot erase the sediment layers of your past, and you cannot change your ancestry, you have absolute agency over what you build on top of that foundation.
Yeah, you're still building the rock.
Yes. You get to choose whether your layered identity is going to act as a bridge to connect with other people's complexities or as a wall to defend your tidy box.
We can honor the absolute reality of where we came from without being permanently anchored there. We don't have to live exclusively in the memories of yesterday. To bring this all together, feeling like you don't fit into a single category, holding on to contradictions, recognizing that you speak different emotional languages in different rooms, none of that is a glitch.
No, it's normal.
As the history of Barbados and the lived experience of Ian R. Clayton prove, that complexity is your greatest strength. It is the literal proof that you are alive and that you are evolving.
Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought for you to mull over today.
Okay, let's hear it.
If identity is truly not a fixed inheritance handed down to you, but rather an ongoing, daily lived experience, if the only metric that matters is who you are becoming, then you need to take a hard, audit-level look at your daily inputs.
Oh, inputs. Like what?
Look at the specific media you are consuming right this second. Look at the communities you are dedicating your energy to.
Right.
Examine the small, seemingly insignificant habits you practice every morning, because you are the architect of your sediment layers. Since your identity isn't just a label printed on a piece of paper, what new identity are you actively or perhaps unconsciously building for yourself today?
Man. So the next time someone stops you and asks, "Where are you from?" Maybe smile and realize that the geography is only the prologue.
It's just the beginning.
The real story is where you are going. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring your own evolving layers, embrace the beautiful contradictions, and we'll see you next time.